The leaders of China and Japan have met for formal talks after more than 2 years of severe tension over a territorial dispute. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Japanese PM Shinzo Abe met on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation (Apec) summit in Beijing. Their first meeting included a public handshake with little sign of warmth. In a speech to Apec, President Obama has meanwhile announced big changes to visa arrangements with China. Multiple entry short-term visas for businessmen and tourists will be extended to 10 years, up from 1 year. Those for students rise from 1 year to 5. Mr. Obama also stressed the importance of ties between China and the U.S., saying the U.S. welcomes the rise of a prosperous, peaceful and stable China. Analysis: Carrie Gracie, BBC China editor. After 2 years of Chinese animosity towards Japan's new Prime Minister, President Xi has finally relented. Today's face-to-face meeting with Shinzo Abe is important progress in relations between the world's second and third largest economies. But the underlying disagreements over territory and history remain as bitter as ever. And even Mr. Xi's body language at today's meeting was calculatedly icy. During the handshake he did not smile or respond to Mr. Abe's attempt at conversation. For all the fireworks and group photographs, this summit brings together neighbors with different worldviews at a difficult moment in history. Awkward. Relations between China and Japan have long been soured by a row over islands in the East China Sea. The uninhabited but strategically important islands, known as Diaoyu by China and Senkaku by Japan, are controlled by Japan but also claimed by China. Tokyo's decision to purchase 3 of them from their private Japanese owner in September 2012 led to an escalation in a dispute that has rumbled quietly for years. The Chinese and Japanese leaders interacted awkwardly as they posed for an unsmiling photo after their talks. Mr. Abe said the meeting, which came 3 days after the two sides agreed to work to prevent the territorial dispute from escalating, was the first step for improving ties by returning to mutually beneficial relations based on common strategic interests. He also said they had agreed to start preparations to establish a maritime crisis mechanism. There have been fears that a clash, accidental or otherwise, between Chinese and Japanese paramilitary vessels patrolling waters around the disputed islands could trigger a conflict. Mr. Xi told Mr. Abe that historical issues concern the feelings of more than 1.3 billion Chinese people and that China hoped Japan would follow a path of peaceful development and adopt prudent military and security policies. China has in the past complained about what it sees as Japan's failure to adequately acknowledge its wartime actions and has been angered by visits by Japanese lawmakers, including Mr. Abe, to the Yasukuni shrine that commemorates Japan's war dead, including convicted war criminals. But Japan's Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Katsunobu Kato said there was no direct mention of the Yasukuni shrine nor of the disputed islands during the half-hour talks. The islands. The 8 uninhabited islands and rocks have a total area of about 7 square kilometers. They are close to strategically important shipping lanes. The waters also offer rich fishing grounds and are thought to contain oil deposits. The islands are controlled by Japan. China says they have been part of its territory since ancient times. Separately, Taiwan also claims the islands. Trade giants. Leaders from the 21 APEC member nations are in Beijing for 2 days of talks. Bilateral meetings between top leaders are taking place on Monday, followed by a formal leaders' summit on Tuesday. APEC, which includes 21 Pacific Rim nations, includes 40% of the world's population, with member countries accounting for about 44% of global trade and more than half of global economic output. The summit takes place as China looks to underline its growing status as regional leader and economic giant. It is the biggest event hosted so far by Mr. Xi, who took over the Chinese presidency in March 2013, and trade is one of the top priorities. The US will be pushing its Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, a 12-nation economic framework along the Pacific Rim which currently excludes China. It is the economic aspect of America's Asia rebalance, which some experts say is aimed at countering China's growing influence in the region. China, however, will be trying to shore up support for its own separate free trade agreement, the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific. In other summit developments, China and South Korea have agreed to sign a bilateral free trade deal which will remove or reduce most barriers to trade and investment between the two countries. Ahead of the summit, Russia and China signed a major gas deal, pledging greater mutually fruitful cooperation. Beijing has also pledged $40 billion, £25.2 billion, to help Asian nations improve trade links. Australian PM Tony Abbott is to seek a robust conversation with Russia's President Vladimir Putin over the Malaysia Airlines plane brought down over Ukraine.